Thank you. I don't know who to look at, so I'm gonna I have a comment, and then I also have a couple questions. My first comment is, we live in one of the wealthiest counties in the United States. So where wealth is considered as a status thing. So I think referencing low income people could be, I don't know, it could be sensitive for some people. I mean, maybe we can refer to like maybe disadvantaged, just our disadvantaged residents or disadvantaged areas.
We can ask Danielle to clarify what definition income levels, because you're right. I mean, low income.
I can imagine if I was a low income person and
you mean $100,000 in this county. So
absolutely, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Teachers are low income people.
Right.
So can you imagine like a teacher like, oh my God, so that's why it's,
Daniel,
I would
can you
imagine
address-
some of our own employees here,
Yeah.
So
Can you address that briefly?
yeah, so to be clear, when we're referencing low-income people in these graphics, what we mean is people who live in households that are at or below 150% of the federal poverty level. So what that means in terms of Santa Cruz County and the living costs that you have in your county is people who are severely disadvantaged based on their income, right? People who are probably experiencing significant challenges in general in their livelihood. And the thing is that, despite the fact that Santa Cruz County is in fact one of the wealthiest counties in the nation, there are still rather significant numbers of people who live in households with very low incomes. And that's why, and we want to make sure that we are representing that constituency within our analysis and within our thought process. It's also a requirement of federal civil rights law to make sure that any changes that are done by transit agencies to service don't disproportionately impact people of color or low-income residents. So we're trying to make sure that we do this right, both because we know that a lot of people in those households are within the core constituency of people who really need Metro on a regular basis, and also to make sure we're doing morally the right thing and to make sure that we're following civil rights law.
No, I understand.
It's a federal standard. It's not area median.
Oh, okay, so that's a federal definition. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, because I'm just thinking that
It's not scalable.
I can imagine, just it could be intimidating to approach this topic at all if you were somebody who's struggling. So if you're already being placed like, oh hey, you're the low income person. And my other ones are is it possible for the 79 to instead of cut through Parkway, go to the roundabout on Riverside and then come back and then go down College? Because it is cutting through a residential neighborhood and I've been getting some complaints and I just want to see if there's a remedy that we could do. I think people are noticing the increase of frequency. So it's and it's only going to become more. So that would be awesome.
That one's not going to change going forward, but it did double. It was hourly, now it's every twice an hour.
Yeah.
We've gotten the same complaint. We go back there because there's people that we're trying to serve back there.
No, absolutely.
It's hard to get
Yeah.
to East Lake and to the corridor, but with
But could we look at that, maybe that different, because I think if we cut that part out, I think we'll solve a lot of that.
yeah,
We'll
if
solve
you
that
could
problem.
send a specific routing suggestion.
Okay, I'll do that for you for sure. And then also, I brought this up before on College. I do see people standing on the hillside. That's kind of mud, dirt. It's not mud at this point because of all the rain. But it seems a little dangerous for our riders to be like kind of standing there where they can get, swiped by they'll drive fast. But so it's on these little roads. And so but if we can get a bus stop there, that'd be great.
Sure.
Thanks. And I know you're probably not the person to tell that to, but someone over here is listening, right? Daniel?
Couple of things. First of all, I don't think we're one of the wealthiest counties in the country, so we'd love to have a stat on that. We're far from it. Right?
What?
We're not.
We're
I mean-
we're 10th in the state.
So, and that's not one of the wealthiest counties in the country?
No, not by far.
If we're 10th in the state?
We get a stat, it'll be really clear about where we stand in relation, what.
Oh my God, this is the disconnect.
We're not the poorest, but we're.
This is the disconnect.
Anyway,
Okay.
when we started this process a while ago, our first idea was to figure out if we took our current service, had to make a hard choice. Do we favor frequency or distribution? And pretty overwhelmingly, I think, not unanimously, we said we want frequency. But we imagined at the time that the result would be certain people are going to go like, hey, things are getting worse for me. I'm not very happy about this. Thankfully, we took a different approach, and what we're doing is like expanding our service at the same time we're making this choice. So we're putting the majority of our resources into frequency, and there are a lot fewer people who are getting screwed over or losing some service that they might have had. I wonder if you could give us some kind of an idea that, even given what we're doing now, who is being disadvantaged by this? Who might we expect hearing when they actually change the service? Things begin to move. We're going to be here, with pitchforks and torches telling us that we're destroying life.
I mean, we've been out for various months, right, doing outreach. We haven't seen the pitchforks yet, but there's still time. These numbers that Daniel walked through, the access analysis and the proximity to transit, because there's no shrinkage of the network, nobody loses service, right? So it's just certain places gain more than other places, right? But the actual network itself is not changing. We're just investing, as you said, in areas where there's higher demand, where we see more potential for growth. So this plan does lean heavily into frequency, but it does so in a way that it brings half of the county really within a 15-minute walk of 15-minute service, right? Frequency is freedom. So it does lean heavily into that. And Daniel, maybe you can add a little more color to the question.
Yeah, I think the big picture that you mentioned is correct, right? But so there were, I think that there were some fairly significant changes to where the bus went and how the routes are organized in December. And then what's being proposed between now and September is largely increases over current service levels, all in the same areas. There is one big thing that we are putting in here that is worthy of consideration, and that we really want to, that we've been putting out there in these meetings and making sure that people hear about it and understand. And that is, we're really changing the way that east-west travel works on the transit network. So at the moment, you have routes 1 and 2 that go from Watsonville all the way to Santa Cruz, and they're these very long local routes. They have some reliability issues due to their length, but they do kind of provide a zero transfer trip between many different possible origins and destinations. The cost of that is that your west side routes are very isolated. If you're on the west side, you're going to have to transfer to go anywhere not on the west side. And so what's being proposed here is that we're trying to bridge some of that gap by, first of all, speeding up the trips that are from Watsonville all the way into Santa Cruz, which are a significant portion of the demand on routes 1 and 2. And speeding up the trips between the west side and the east side by joining the 1, 2, 3 on the east side with the 18, 19, and well, I guess still 3 on the west side. And that means that between Watsonville and Santa Cruz, we are creating this one split in service at Cabrillo College. And we are proposing to basically mitigate that split with all these increases in frequencies so that people's average wait times on cross-county trips don't change, even if they're not going quite between the center of Watsonville and Santa Cruz. But I think that there's a legitimate question as to was that the right choice to make in increasing frequencies? And I think that's something that, depending on the feedback we receive, may change a little bit between the draft and the final. I think the intention of increasing the 90X to all-day service is fairly baked in at this point. I haven't heard any negative feedback about that, but yeah, that was my elaboration.
And today we haven't heard much about the transfer issue, but we have heard some feedback around specific trips, particularly around Freedom Center and rural Freedom. So previously to phase 1, our most frequent cross-county route went the rural Freedom route, right, the 71. We flipped that. We put all the frequency through the more densely populated areas of Watsonville, Freedom, Lincoln, Main Street, and then those routes get on the freeway. And we have heard from people that used to ride the 71 that it's just not frequent enough. And we are increasing in March the 73 to every half hour from every hourly. And the second piece of that is a direct connection from Freedom Center to Capitola Mall. And so I think one change we'll present when we come back in March is extending the 73 from Cabrillo to Capitola Mall. And that seemed to satisfy at least the people we talked to so far. Those are kind of the most kind of pointed comments against the plan, or in response to the plan so far.
A couple of questions. Jimmy, I wanted to follow up, and this is an interesting thing. It feels like it's been more than 30 years that I can recall where we increased frequency and it generated complaints about buses in the neighborhood. Am I understanding?
Yeah, because this is going through that a certain neighborhood, yeah.
Okay, but there are neighborhoods where we're trying to increase access and hopefully people will get on the bus.
Larry, I brought up one neighborhood,
Oh, I know.
one street.
And I know
That's
of
all I
one,
said.
I know of one on the west side of Santa Cruz where there were complaints in the 80s when service was increased on High Street.
Mhm.
So noisy buses going by, just curious. Other questions had to do with driver time behind the wheel. Some of these routes look very long and I was curious, like maybe the Route 3 from origin to destination and back, how much time might there be for the driver before they get a break? And that leads to a question of, are the September improvements in phase 2 dependent on a layover spot at UCSC? It looks like 1, 2, and 3 terminate and then go back out. Can you update us on that?
Yeah, so those last two questions are directly related. Part of the rationale behind this network was to even out operator time behind the wheel across the network. So the old 71 could do up to an hour and 40 minutes one way, right? By splitting the routes more in the middle of the district, we're evening that out on both sides, east and west, and creating more even total run times between routes. But making that happen is completely dependent on identifying a layover location at UCSC. So if we're having really positive discussions with UCSC and TAPS about where that location can be and getting that ready for September. If it doesn't happen, we know from the experience of Route 3 right now that we can't operate this network without doing that. So
Okay,
we
thanks.
won't.
When you said 7 days a week, weekdays, weekends, does that include holidays?
We got that question a couple times this week. We honestly hadn't considered it, but we'll consider it now. We were considering Saturday, Sunday. We didn't think about changing the holiday plan of
Well,
service.
holidays will let you reach people that would normally take the bus.
Mhm.
This is where the parking isn't great. Plus, if you gotta work on the holiday, you still have to get there.
Yeah.
So some of these routes still won't have super frequent service, and the longer somebody waits for the bus, I believe the better the shelter should be. You were talking about, signs in the dirt next to the road. And I just would like to make sure that while we're doing this, that we can accommodate people and care for them while they're waiting, because they might not take it otherwise, or especially if they have to wait in certain areas for a little bit longer than some of the less frequent routes. So I have a friend who just can't stand the 3B anymore because it's unreliable, blah, 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 multiple times. And it kind of started to get me thinking about some of the other challenges, the learning curve for this whole project. Jimmy was mentioning a street. I know in Aptos, we've got a street now where it's a residential neighborhood and there's been some complaints about speeding and stopping and all that. With regard to Cabrillo, since there's a lot more emphasis there, is there a way to work with Cabrillo to provide a little bit better facilities so that maybe some of these other neighborhoods aren't impacted? That's a question. But the other one is are you running into some other challenges that you're going to have to deal with moving some of these routes? And how have you been sort of working on those?
The two that were mentioned today were the only ones that have come up so far around resident complaints, non-customers upset about more buses coming through. The reason that the 73 is doing that route is because we wanted to make the transfer as convenient as people for customers at Cabrillo College. In order to do that, the last stop inbound happens at the same location that buses that continue inbound, the 1 and 2 go, and then it goes around the block, and comes back. If we just loop the backside of Cabrillo, people would have to run across Soquel to get from one direction to the other. So we didn't want to do that. We've heard a lot of complaints. We may need to consider that. That would come at the expense of convenience to our customers having to do that. So so far, those are the only 2 locations where those types of concerns have come up. And I do think in the plan that we'll bring in March, you'll see the 73 extend to Capitola Mall. So we won't be dealing with that issue anymore going forward. Yeah.
We also won't totally resolve the issue, but it will help when we're totally electric. If the bus comes.
That's nice. Yeah.
Hydrogen.
White, yeah.
Yep. On the shelters, yeah, we need to improve the whole experience for people. We got let's call it a Clean California grant to upgrade 23 shelters throughout the district. And then we also have funding through our TIRSIP award last year for 35 shelters on Soquel between Watsonville and Santa Cruz. And so it'll take some time to get those projects on the ground. The 23 shelters will be in place by the end of the year. The TIRSIP grant's going to take probably 2 to 3 years to upgrade those. But it's a great point. The whole experience needs to work for people, not just the frequency.
The other area that I've been hearing in particularly the campaign forums talking about San Lorenzo Valley in the north end of town, not, the impression everyone there in the forums have talked about only having 1 hour service every hour. And obviously the shelters in that area are really dangerous.
Yeah.
And I-9 has always been. I don't even know how
Yeah,
to improve it because there's no room. But I mean, the whole North County, that's the thing we're hearing is they feel neglected, and it sounds as though, and even I wasn't as clear on it, that there would be an improvement in 30 minutes.
On the weekend, so 7 days a week, 30 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, what I was hearing from parents is kids and things and not being able, it doesn't work for school, it doesn't fit the timing, isn't, but.
Well, we could potentially look to add more school term service up in the valley. It's like you said, it's a really challenging area. There's one road and now it's one lane.
Right.
Not,
And North County's been the neglected area because of logistics, I know.
yeah, although historically has had some of the most frequent service in like 30 minutes and 35 and the 71 were the most frequent routes outside of the UC service area. So by metro standards, it was always kind of the most frequent service. Not, and I think,
Not San Lorenzo, not up in Boulder Creek in that area.
well, where it splits, right, past Boulder Creek. Yeah. But we heard the concern. We have some San Lorenzo Valley residents come to the Santa Cruz meeting to share those concerns. And so we'll consider additional tweaks to this plan going forward.
Totally understand the challenge, but did say would pass that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. You've been here.
I just want to, so per the US Census Bureau, there are 3,144 counties. Santa Cruz ranks 78th per capita, and they also rank 90th per median income. That puts us in the top 2% in the country. So to me, that is one of the wealthiest counties in the country.
Sure.
So I just want to be clear. I'm not here making numbers up,
I would find it back in.
Well, you brought it up and, it was some off of a comment that I had made, so I'm just clarifying it.
That's actually a statistic that I'm gonna start using more often. Any additional questions or comments? Yes, please.
Well, I was up on the summit recently and got a question whether that 17 bus could ever make a stop again at Summit and Highway 17. I also that same night drove back and was like, this is a challenging intersection.
Yeah, I tried to get back on.
Especially coming into Santa Cruz, that ramp is, I don't know how you turn around there. But did you evaluate that at all?
We've evaluated that in the past. We've gotten that comment before. And like you said, it's just a really challenging area to turn us around. The freeway, it doesn't really seem feasible. There is a small park and ride lot there, right, with a couple of spaces. But you're not going to get people kind of walking in from the neighborhood, so to speak. So probably not. It's challenging areas.
And then with the map, and it's like how far you can get in 60 minutes or 45 minutes. I think I remember from previous presentations, that is total trip length, right? Us walking to the walk, stop,
Waiting for
the bus.
It assumes that you don't look at the schedule, that you just walk to the bus stop and show up randomly.
It's
But-
intended to be comparable to your experience on any other mode where, you know, you would just leave your home when you leave your home, which could be at any random time.
Thank you. And that's where obviously the frequency improvements improve the travel time.
I have a couple questions as well. One is about Route 55. And it looks like in March, it goes all the way over to the Capitola Mall. And then come September, it's going to terminate at Cabrillo College. But then 1 or 2 will pick you up and take you wherever you need to go in that direction.
Yep.
So I've heard some comments recently about that, but it's not about the termination at Cabrillo or the fact that it's not going to go further. It's the fact that if you get on 55 in Aptos or Rio Del Mar, you have to go all the way out to La Selva and then circle back to get to somewhere like Cabrillo College. And so I'm wondering if there's any consideration in that becoming a 2-way route. So that those who might otherwise want to be going north don't first have to go south.
We really tried. We'll keep trying. The streets through Rio Del Mar and as you're getting out to La Selva, they're just not set up in a lot of locations for 2-way service in terms of places where we could put a bus stop. There are some locations. The benefit of shortening the route to Cabrillo is it'll come more frequent. It'll actually be every hour, not every hour, 30, 45. We've kind of changed it.
On Route 55?
Yeah, so it'll be more frequent, at least hourly. Most people will have to transfer. We'll keep working on it to see if we can do bidirectional service. Bidirectional service, though, may mean less frequent because we'd have to add more resources to the route. But yeah.
Okay, and then the other thing I was curious about hearing is since we're almost at the completion in phase 1 with the West Side UCSC, have we received any feedback on that? Were there any unexpected challenges? Is it just all good news so far?
It's mixed. The main challenge we've been having on Route 3, so our first kind of foray into the east-west connection is just the reliability. And it's a function of not having a place to stop the bus, a terminal on campus. And so as Director Pegler mentioned, it's a really long seat, really long time for the operator of the bus, sometimes upwards of 2 hours. We're experiencing a lot of delays. So it doesn't work as a round trip, basically. So that's getting to a terminal on campus is really key to the implementation of the rest of this idea that we're laying out in this plan. So some growing pains on the operations, although, and I don't have great ridership data yet. We did submit the quarterly report, but it only had a couple of days of phase 1 implementation in the last quarter's ridership. We knew beforehand that about a quarter of Live Oak residents on the 66 or Live Oak boardings on the 66 and 68 were UCSC headed. And that seems to be at least holding steady, if not increasing. Anecdotally, I see a lot of students and maybe other faculty and staff continuing on those 3 routes through downtown. So that was the whole point. Seems to be working. We'll wait for more data to see if it's really doing what we thought it would do.
Great. And then my final comment, I'm not 100% sure that this is even the right time to address this, but it was brought to me and I think that I want to mention it now that we're talking about routes. Someone approached me about bus service at Juvenile Hall. And that when young people are having their hearings at Juvenile Hall, one of the things that's taken into consideration is whether or not there's adult presence there for them to provide support, and if that support will carry on outside of their time there. And so because quite often those from disadvantaged communities are more impacted by the criminal justice system, I'm wondering if there is an opportunity at some point for us to look at the equity the possibility of equity impacts and creating some kind of stop at some point at the juvenile hall to provide more access to folks who might need to be there for the youth that are incarcerated in their hearings.
Yeah, we'll consider it for the next couple of weeks as we put final touches on the plan. I might call up the time machine if that was ever considered in the past or.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
But wasn't there an issue with the?
No, we can serve it. We had the Route 30 previously, which served Graham Hill into Scotts Valley. It was less than 1 rider per hour. And was one of the first things we cut in the run cuts that we did on that. But it just wasn't used, but we did used to serve that area.
Great. All right, any further questions or comments on this item? Okay, seeing none, we'll take it out to public comment. Thank you. Do you have any